Hi, everyone. We're just giving a minute for other participants to join, and we'll get started in a minute here. All right. I think we're seeing a slowdown for the participants joining, so let's get started. So we can fit in a lot of conversation here. The Q&A should be open for anyone who has questions. The chat is also available. The Q&A is a great place for you to just put the questions. We're going to be checking there first since the chat can happen pretty quickly and we might get stuff lost. But certainly feel free to have dialogue in the chat. I'm sure our panelists will be answering some as they go too, but because that's the way Zoom works, there's always like side conversations. So if there's, say, something mentioned and you want to know more about it, you're looking for a link, drop that in the chat, and myself, Molly, or the panelists might be jumping in and just dropping some info there as well, because we're certainly not going to have enough time to really get to everything going on, especially what's happening in our community. So I'm going to do a quick introduction here to our panelists and see how fast I can get through this so we can jump into the meat of it. I'm going to start in reverse order from the listing on the event. First, we have Gayle Nelson, President and CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Miami. Gayle is President and CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters of Miami, the city's premier youth and mentoring nonprofit organization. His professional career includes over 20 years of nonprofit management and leadership experience. Prior to joining Big Brothers Big Sisters, he served for 12 years as the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of a moderate risk residential school for educated boys. Ooh, I butchered that. And Gayle's email is in the event description, and we'll just skip over that so I don't have to read off emails. Raul Mos is the Miami Program Director for the Knight Foundation. He joined the Knight Foundation as Miami's Program Director in March 2018. Prior to joining Knight, Mos served as the Managing Director for Miami Angels, Florida's largest angel investor collective, which brings together exceptional entrepreneurs and accredited investors to fuel success. He's passionate about the greater Miami and deeply involved in making community a better place. And moving up to Rebecca Fishman Lipsy, new President and CEO of the Miami Foundation. Rebecca joined just a couple months ago, I think I have correctly.
4 weeks ago.
4 weeks, oh my gosh. That just shows how bad my timeline is right now too, of what's happening. Formerly with founder of Radical Partners, served 4-year term on the Florida Board of Education and started her career as a teacher in Harlem, New York. In her free time, she serves as a personal assistant to 2 small children. And I think we all know what that's like right now too.
No joke.
Maybe we'll get a cameo. Michael Finney is the president and CEO of the Miami-Dade's Beacon Council. As president and CEO of the Beacon Council, Michael Finney champions job creation and economic development for Miami-Dade County. Marketing Miami as a world-class business destination. He works closely with both private and public sector community leaders to attract, retain business, investments, and the workforce needed to expand growing and a dynamic economy. And we've got Tony Cho from Metro One. Tony is the founder and CEO of Metro One, a forward-thinking real estate brokerage, management, and development firm focused on shaping neighborhoods in cities' urban cores. The company has completed over $2.5 billion in real estate transactions since 2005. Through the Metro One Community Fund, Cho and his partners are extremely active in giving back to Miami, especially in the Upper East Side neighborhood of Little Haiti, the firm calls home. So enough reading off of the sheet. Thank you all for joining us. This is a powerhouse group, and I would be lying if I didn't say I was incredibly intimidated by each and every one of you. The sum of that is just exponentially more intimidating. So thank you for joining. And I think we're gonna have a good conversation here. The panel is called What Now Miami? And I think I have had this conversation many times since COVID really became prevalent. And I think I've talked to a few of you just individually about that in the buildup is, what is going on? And I think we've probably all had this kind of conversation in one way or another, is that what I think we're seeing happen is that COVID-19 has put a spotlight and kind of made us look behind the curtain of a lot of things going wrong with the way society works and the way it's built. I think we all know that there's many, many factors at play in the way that we see injustices serving our community. And now coupled with some of the issues we're seeing, especially around the Black Lives Matter movement and policing in our communities, we're really forced with an opportunity to really make aggressive changes to the way things are done. And so I hope from this, we can understand a little bit more about what are some of those issues from our specific vantage points, and what are your organizations doing, and what do you think and hope that others could be doing? I think that you also have a very a privileged point of view in the sense that you know what you can do as an organization, but you also see opportunities outside of your purview and outside of your area of expertise. And so as we have that conversation today, I hope that others listening can kind of say, hey, I actually can move the needle on that, and I would like to get more involved and contribute and complement their efforts, or get involved in how they're doing work. So with that being said, let's just jump into it. And I would love to start with Big Brothers Big Sisters and the work that's going on there. You highlighted on your letter, Gayle, which I'll link to here in a second, that 7 out of 10 children are served through Big Brothers Big Sisters Miami are Black. Can you tell me more about what Big Brothers Big Sisters is doing, how we can help, and are there any elements you wish you could work on that's just outside of your reach as an organization?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And Big Brothers Big Sisters has been serving Miami-Dade County since 1958. And as we think about what we do every day, we bring people together in the relationship. We're in the relationship business. I say all the time to my board and to my colleagues nationally, we're first responders in the relationship business, because we bring people together regardless of their backgrounds to build mutual trust and respect. But let me just go ahead and just be very frank. As a Black man leading Big Brothers Big Sisters in the midst of everything that's taking place nationwide, as the chair of the DEI committee nationally for Big Brothers Big Sisters of America, I'm hurting right now. It hurts to see people that look like me just being villainized, being killed. And so the talk, if you ask any Black person, specifically a Black man, about the talk, I'm not talking about birds and the bees. I'm talking about how you deal with a police officer. And as I think about the space of Big Brothers Big Sisters, I'll be concise, but I want to make sure that people understand and feel the anguish of the mothers and the fathers and the children whom we serve as it relates to police brutality. And as I think about my experience, because I've had an experience with police, And my parents divorced when I was 2 years old. And when I went out to Oakland, California to visit my dad, my estranged father, I was seeking to build a relationship, speaking of relationships. And long story short, I get a rental car at the airport, throw my suitcase in the trunk like any other traveler. And as I get to my dad's place, I'm cut off by 2 cars. I see some guys get out. I see a badge. I'm thinking, okay, that's good. I was comforted. I wasn't afraid because I hadn't done anything. Get out of the car. And there's a gun there. Then the other one said, don't move. I'm thinking, hey guys, I can't do both. You just told me to get out of the car and you just told me not to move. And so I just put my hands up on the steering wheel and I said, I don't know what to do. What do you want me to do? So I opened the door slowly, pulled me out, put me on the trunk, gun to my head. I never had a gun to my head in my life. And opened the trunk, saw my bag and said, at least you were safe tonight. And then they left. I cried myself to sleep that night. This was 33 years ago. I just shared that with my mom 2 weeks ago in light of the recent events. So now why do I share that? Because that gives you context. One of the many experiences I've had, not only with police, but just as a Black man, sitting on the bus stop after track practice and seeing 5 kids go by in a car, all were white, and they yelled the N-word. And I'm thinking, and then they hit the brakes. And I'm looking at the brakes thinking, if they come back, I don't want to fight. I got to fight for my life or run and jump someone's fence and run in their backyard. And that would not end well. So this is the pain and trauma that Black folks are feeling, that I've experienced personally. But in the Big Brothers Big Sisters space, I'm happy to say that we started long before these incidents with the Bigs in Blue program, bringing police officers together with children. And I'm not saying that in any way because there's no excuse for police brutality. And I've talked to chiefs who are bigs here in Miami. And we have to focus on humanity, not just putting up social media posts, not just making corporate statements. We must get involved in this relationship space because through the lens of mentoring, last point, we can impact. When you ask Raul, for example, as a big, in terms of, he'll say, that's a part of my family. It's not about this Black child, this white child. Yes, we need to see color. Don't say you don't see color. I want you to see me as a Black man. It hurts my heart when people say, I don't see you as Black. Then what do you see me as? See me as the Black man that I am, CEO that I am, but most importantly, taking actionable steps to help people understand that this moment we have, this is a moment that needs to be a movement. We can't say that this is something we'll get through, and I hope this ends shortly. I hope it does. I hope we keep having these uncomfortable conversations about race and relationships. So Big Brothers, Big Sisters will continue to make those meaningful relationships and make them count so that we as Miami can be a better place.
Thank you for that, Gayle. Wow. You mentioned too on the letter, the impact stance, that there's additional trainings and workshops and investment in the community. Can you speak a little bit more to that and tell us what like action items that maybe people can be aware of?
Absolutely. I was trying to be concise because I'm a little shy, but thank you for giving me.
I'm going to give it to. I want to hear it from everyone. There's so many incredible things happening. We need to talk about it.
No, thank you, Bruce. No, one of the things we're doing, we partner with the national, the NAACP, the oldest civil rights organization in the United States, and we will be providing not only just voter registration year round, so folks can remain civically engaged, but additionally, we'll provide trainings to our bigs and littles. And on June 19th, we think about Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, when the slaves, 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, were informed that you are free in Galveston, Texas. And so here we are talking about freedom and equality in 2020, COVID-19, racism 2020. Think about that for a minute. And so the training and the conversations that we started on Juneteenth will involve corporate leaders, community leaders, law enforcement, our littles, and parents. So we can talk about how are you feeling and what are some specific actionable things we can do, because silence is not an option. And I want to thank all of our white allies, because this is not just about just Black folks. I want to thank every white ally, every corporation, every business, those who are saying, enough's enough. We cannot stand for this. And so those trainings will include allies, families, littles, and most importantly, our bigs who are taking time out already to help these kids. So Bruce, that's really something we're excited about. Awesome.
Thank you, Gayle. And I will drop a link in the chat for folks, but it's bbbsmiami.org for their site, so you can sign up for those programs, get involved. You just mentioned something, and I'm not sure if I heard it correctly, but is Raul, are you a big brother?
Yeah, so my wife and I are paired. So big brother, big sister here in Miami have been now, God knows how long, 6 years, 7 years now. Yeah, and Gayle and I have had a chance to kind of bond and talk over that for a while.
Well, this is what we call a segue, transition. So now, Raul, I want to know a little bit more about.
You've done this before, Bruce.
I love these Zoom things. Anyway, so Raul, I got an email from you about a night initiative that's going on, and it is the Emerging Cities Champions, which I know is empowering Gen Z and millennial inventors in their communities. Can you tell me a little bit more about that program for anyone who doesn't know? I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And then I've got a follow-up about the startup community. Another interesting article came out from the Miami Herald about what's going on and kind of the reckoning that the startup community has to have. So I'd like to follow up with that too.
Sure, yeah. So we've partnered up with 80 cities now for several years to launch and produce the Emerging Cities Champions program at Knight Foundation, which really seeks to find from the grassroots who are the folks, the thinkers, the doers, the activists who are thinking of their cities in a different light. And so often, I think especially in philanthropy, it's hard to break in if you don't have the right connections, if you don't have the right intro, or people perceive philanthropy to be hard to break into. And this is kind of a way to democratize access. You have an idea how to make Miami a better place. In this case, how to make Miami more equitable, more accessible. We want to hear about it, right? However, kind of at the margins of realistic it might be, however kind of futuristic it might be, that's exactly the kind of idea that we want coming into the fold, and that we can also fund with some pilot money. And so the idea really is to curate from all parts of Miami, how do we make the city better, right? And so each year there's been perhaps a different theme or different spin on how we can kind of focus our resources in a certain direction. This year we really want to focus on access and equity. How can we get novel ideas that are from the grassroots, right? There's no gatekeeping function whatsoever. Anybody and everybody can submit a proposal about how you can use a few dollars to pilot and test it could be a public space project, it could be an event, it could be a convening, it could be whatever it is that you think makes this place, Miami, more accessible and more equitable for all Miamians.
Thank you. And then Raul, there was an article, I think, that came out today from the Miami Foundation, or sorry, from the Miami Herald. And it talks about just, I think, like equality we're dealing with in the workforce and startups and things like that. From your perspective, what needs to be done for the Miami startup ecosystem? Because I know you're deeply connected with it, so that we're not, just kind of elevating this golden egg and saying like, how are we actually building a diverse workforce and the systems in place? And admittingly, the whereby us, we constantly are trying to work on this, and I think we're not always hitting the mark. And so, what can we be doing, say, or what advice would you have for startups and how they can make sure they're active and not reactionary to what's going on?
Yeah. So first, I just want to honor kind of what Gayle said and everything he said. And first of all, for the truth, for taking kind of the varnish and the pleasantries off of it, because I think that we do ourselves a massive disservice. This is going to be uncomfortable, right? There are going to be many, many times when we as individuals don't get it right, and we as institutions and organizations don't get it right. And that's scary for different reasons. For someone who's type A, it's scary because you might think that you're losing control or you're not doing something to the best of your craft. It's also scary because especially if you're really big on and active and put a lot of time and weight into kind of the public discourse and some of the social media sites, it's easy to kind of get villainized for getting it wrong, right? You didn't get it right, and sometimes folks assume that there wasn't either a thought or malicious intent even behind what you did. And so I think the first thing we need to do is acknowledge that this is not going to be something that we have a few plenaries or events about, and all of a sudden things are better hunky-dory. And to Gayle's point, I really hope this lasts for a while, right? I hope that we're able to have these uncomfortable moments. Gayle said something really interesting about seeing the reality, the hopes, the pains, the aspirations of the mothers and fathers of kids that are littles through Big Brothers Big Sisters. to see them as humans and as parents in the way that we are parents and siblings and all that. And I think that's kind of what we really have to come back to the core in Miami. And in Miami, I think we have an advantage in some ways, also somewhat of a hurdle, but an advantage in that so many folks in this community have had some sort of hardship or trauma or suffering in getting here, in just pursuing their version of the American dream. I don't want to discount or belittle or diminish the truth, which is that even in Miami, especially within and even within migrant and immigrant communities that by American standards are diverse, there is racial prejudice. That is the truth. But I also think we have an asset in that we can tap into our own communities, respective communities, kind of collective sufferings. In my case, how can I help the Cuban American community, my fellow Cuban Americans, tap into their collective trauma and pain of exile, of being refugees in this country, to empathize and see the pain that their neighbor, in this case, perhaps a Black neighbor, a Black mother, a Black father, might also have, right? It might manifest differently, but it's the same aspirations, the same hope, it's the same pain that we have for our kids in terms of what brought my grandparents here and what somebody here wants for their kids. So I think that's the fundamental truth that I would lead on and I lead with. And then in startup land, in startup communities across the country, particularly in Miami, I think it's really this question of welcoming. If there's a theme that Miami really has to tap into and lean into unreservedly, with all the warts and all the uncomfortable elements of it in the next kind of few years, it has to be about how we welcome and receive people. And I think if you indulge me for 30 more seconds, it has two elements, two prongs. As much as we are an immigrant community, as much as we're a welcoming community, I think all of us here can nod in agreement that we've heard the phrase before, what high school did you go to, right? In Miami, we almost peg social status based on what prep school you might have gone to or not. That's not welcoming. That's funky. That's different, right? And so we have to welcome Miamians who long life residents, right, into our communities in the same way we would welcome kind of anybody else. If you're in the city, you should be at all the tables, and not only be at the tables, but have an active, constructive role in defining the future. So we have to welcome one another. That's the first thing we have to do. We have to truly welcome one another. And I think the second thing, especially for startup communities in the country, Miami in particular, there's a lot of folks that are increasingly looking at South Florida as a place to live because the quality of life here is interesting. It's good. It's a good value proposition. We have to welcome those that are coming from other places and help them find their community, help them find their squad, their tribe, attaching people to place so that Miami is not just the sixth borough of New York, but rather those New Yorkers, those Californians, wherever you might be coming from, they really grow roots here. They attach to place here. I think both of those things, how we welcome folks earnestly, unreservedly, with all those kind of idiosyncrasies that Miami has, I think that's going to shape the next few decades of the city.
Awesome. Thanks, Raul. Who wants to follow that up? No. Actually, Raul, you did talk a lot about community, and that leaves us with Tony, Rebecca, and Michael, who are deeply involved in the communities at various levels. I would like to know a little bit, Tony, about your work with Metro One and what's going on. We initially started this conversation because of the Little Haiti Relief Fund that you had been starting at the early stages of COVID-19. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and the way you view community development.
Sure, it would be my honor. Thanks, Bruce, and I'm honored to be here with this stellar cast on this Zoom call. Gayle, you really definitely impacted me, your story and what you've been through, and it really, I have a very interesting story. I was raised by my grandmother, who was an interfaith spiritual teacher who did same-sex and interracial marriages in Central Florida in our community, and we had the local KKK group, demonstrating on our lawns and burning crosses. And, so I thought I was very open-minded and progressive, and, and through this whole Black Lives Matter movement and through all the pain and suffering that our Black brothers and sisters are experiencing, I'm realizing how little I really experience as a white person in this world and how that white privilege has really served me in my own career. I don't come from a rich background, but certainly the way that people perceive me because of the color of my skin has impacted my success. And so I think it's really important that we recognize that, because I think I think there's so many white allies, you know, and people who are sympathetic and empathetic and supportive of the Black Lives Matter movement and just, justice and equality in general. But I think a lot of people are unaware. They don't experience it, so they don't have the context. So thank you for, contextualizing your experience. And I'm sure every, Black person in this world has had some form of racism that they've experienced. And I think it's really important for us to see that and to face that uncomfortable reality that we're facing now. And I'm with you. I don't want this to end until we can course correct and make a big difference. It's really important. It's gone on for way too long. And we're the only species that allows people to go hungry, to be discriminated against, to have 1 billion people that don't have food or water, clean food or water. And it's unacceptable. And so that was what informed my career as a business person. And I started out being very passionate about the environment. And 15 years ago, when I launched Metro One in Wynwood, in a warehouse, I started a green building resource center and a community center. And no one was really interested in climate change or sea level rise back then, 15 years ago. But it was something that I was very passionate about. And I always believed that small businesses were the lifeblood of the community, and Main Street was really important to have authentic place. And so I've always been in kind of the placemaking space and being one of the early guys in Wynwood and Little Haiti and the design district and kind of the entire urban core, because I was inspired by all the creative class and the innovators that were coming into those areas, because it was affordable and it was interesting and there were a lot of artists and creative people there. And that was what kind of really inspired my career 20 years ago in Wynwood. But really, it's always been about advocating for the small independent business. And so when COVID happened, I had this aha moment and said, well, the people who are going to be most impacted are small businesses by what's happening. And then, of course, Black small businesses even more impacted. So I said, what can we do to help? And so we, reached out to friends at the Miami Foundation, and I launched 2 donor advised funds with my wife, Jimena. And the first one was the M1 Community Fund, and we started the Little Haiti Small Business Relief Fund, because I've been working in Little Haiti for 20 years, since I was working in Edison Senior High with the Nonviolence Project. And that was even predate when I was in real estate. And that experience really impacted me, because I really got to witness firsthand the disparity between, the worlds that I had been living in Miami Beach and nightlife, and then in real estate, and then what was happening, on the ground in Little Haiti. And so we launched this Little Haiti Small Business Relief Fund with United Way and the Miami Foundation, and we raised about $70,000, and we helped directly, 11 businesses and a number of Black-owned businesses in Little Haiti. And that was just something small that we could do. But I think really it's about doing what you can. And I think, Bruce, you talked about this in the beginning. Everybody's going to play a role in this transformation. We're going through, a major shift around the world, not just in the United States, not just in Miami. And it's going to take every single person, to create this new vision of humanity, society, cities that we all want to be part of. And I think everybody does play an active role. And it starts with our own process individually, recognizing our own limitations, our own shortcomings, and really trying to make a concerted effort to be more intentional about everything that we do. When it talks about, when it talks about, hiring people, or, I'm an investor in a number of different companies, and having diversity and why that's important, and really being intentional, because I think a lot of us don't get out of our comfort zone. It's easy. We have a network. This one refers this one. And that's what perpetuates all of this institutionalized discrimination, separation, and everything that we're experiencing now. So as they always say, you have to break down to break through. And we're breaking down as a society on many different levels, from a political standpoint, from an environmental standpoint, from a social standpoint, from a racial standpoint. And I think it's really important that we go through this uncomfortable moment, and there's going to be a lot of pain and suffering, but it's fertile grounds for recreation, reorganization, and restructuring of everything. Every single industry, every single person, every single company is trying to reinvent themselves right now and figure out, well, where do we all fit in? And so the only way that I think we're going to survive this and get to the other side is as a collective and really supporting one another and getting through this process. So community is at the core of everything that we should be focused on, embracing the people who have, been marginalized and who have been have been left out of the conversation, and really being intentional and doing everything that we can to really make things right as best as we can as individuals and as a collective. And I think Miami, like Raul said, has a very unique position and story from a climate story, because we're ground zero for sea level rise and climate change. Why don't we be the poster children for innovation and solutions, in that field? Why don't we work on solutions together and be an example of how to be the most resilient city from a social standpoint, from social equality, from an innovation standpoint, from, a resiliency standpoint? Why don't we take that leadership role? We are a very sexy city. We're a great place to live. We have a great quality of life. We have incredible places to visit. The tax climate is very attractive, and people are moving to Florida. And like Raul said, let's plug them into our community and let's reinvent this together, because we have an opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. So you talked about, you mentioned a few times about things like breaking down, and I think that's totally right. There's a lot of the systems are kind of being pushed to the limits. And in kind of linking up our what now, there is a sense of urgency here. And I want to talk about a deadline that is tomorrow, which is for the COVID-19 Aversion Fund that Beacon Council is helping get the word out and running with Career Source South Florida. Michael, can you tell us a little bit about that and what's going on at the Beacon Council level for the ways that businesses can and our community can support and build up and hopefully weather, but also come out stronger the other side of all this?
Yeah.
Bruce, that's alumni big brother Michael Finney. Alumni big brother Michael Finney.
I know.
Let's get that right, please.
I'm sorry.
So, hey, thanks a lot, Bruce, and to Gayle and Raul. I am a alumni big brother. Back 19 years with 3 different young men, and all doing well. So it is an amazing experience, and I would highly recommend it for anybody that's trying to figure out ways that they can really contribute and give back. Raul mentioned during his comments that we're going to make mistakes, and we need to step back, take a look at what we've done, and fix it. The reality is that if we're making mistakes while trying to do good, that's such a good thing. In fact, I think we'll find that by just trying to do good, we're going to do far more positive than we will negative. And it's just something, it's a condition that we'll have to get to. I think back to my dad. My dad came to Flint, Michigan from Alabama back in the early 1950s, like 1951. And he just had this incredible ability to get joy out of the positive things that he did, out of helping his friends, whether it was going hunting and coming back with meat that he could give to neighbors, if it was cash, if it was giving someone a ride, if it was buying someone a drink, it didn't matter. Anytime my father did good, you could see it, you could feel it, you could tell that he was excited about having helped someone. And to me, that's all we have to figure out how to do. So for those folks who feel as if they help me, they're somehow going to disadvantage themselves or their family member or another close friend that they have. Trust me, that's not the case. By helping me or helping somebody like me, you literally are creating opportunities for the pie to get bigger, as opposed to us having to divide the pie into ever smaller parts. It really gets bigger, and the opportunity gets bigger. And so I would say, let's go ahead and make all those mistakes. But they're mistakes that we're making while we're trying to do good and trying to make sure that we help our brothers. One other example that I'll give, and then I'll answer your question, Bruce. I've been following fairly closely a lot of the just incredible announcements of resources that's being made available to the Black community. Magic Johnson announced a $100 million fund that he's going to invest in Black-owned businesses. Robert Smith has made several major gifts to colleges and universities. Netflix announced a $120 million fund to 2 historically Black colleges and the United Negro College Fund. Michael Jordan, and I can go on and on. I mean, there's these incredible announcements from the corporate world, from very wealthy individuals, and they're committing these resources. And I got to believe they feel pretty good about what they're doing. And just like my father, who might buy someone a drink or lend them $1, they were giving within their capacity to give, right? They weren't taking something away from a friend or a family member. But when you think about what they're doing, they're enlarging the pie. So whether it's Magic Johnson or Netflix or whoever they're doing, if they're helping to educate someone or to pay off college tuition, guess what happens when those individuals complete? The pie gets larger because you have that many more individuals that's going to contribute positively to everything that we're doing. Again, I could go on with this indefinitely because the power of giving is so much more compelling and worthwhile than the power of hate and the power of selfishness and opportunity and even white privilege, right? It's understanding that you can give so much more than you can ever absorb through whatever privilege it is that you have. And it's just something that I learned at a very young age, and I built my entire life around trying to make sure that I'm giving more than I'm trying to take from others. So back to your question. We've been involved with helping businesses right from the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis. Mayor Jimenez and others from the county asked us to get involved and to really extend ourselves beyond the normal box that we fit into. You know, normally Beacon Council is working with your more established companies that are in a growth mode, whether they're in this community, around the United States, around the world. We're looking for companies that are in a growth mode and looking to expand, and we try and work with those companies to ensure that that expansion or location happens in Miami. But with this crisis, we had 90,000 companies in Miami-Dade that was in need of help because everybody got shut down. And by definition, individual contributors, the gig economy workers, sole proprietors, they're a part of that 90,000. And for the most part, their structure for operating the business is very different than the larger established companies. And so what we had to do is we had to rebuild our own organization in a way that's allowing us now to be responsive to that type of company, the kind that we typically do not engage with because there are many other organizations in our community that engage with that type of company. But even with that existing infrastructure, it was not enough in order to best serve these businesses. So we stood up a website that's intended to help those companies get access to technical assistance and, of course, the funding. The website is bizhelp.miami, bizhelp.miami. And on that website, we included tools like the PPP program that also sunsets tomorrow. If companies don't get their applications in by tomorrow for this multi-billion-dollar program, then they miss that opportunity to get access to it. And then at the local level, you referenced the COVID-19 Layoff Aversion Fund. That was put together by CareerSource South Florida. And we are one of 4 organizations that's helping with the rollout of that. And basically, it allows companies that are looking for relatively small amounts of money, but again, targeting relatively small companies between 3 and 50 employees to get access to funding in the range of $5,000 up to $10,000. So we're responsible for managing about $500,000 of that. I think total there's about $2 million that's available between the 4 organizations. And so we all are right now accepting applications via an online portal. And those applications will then ultimately be directed to CareerSource for funding. And the details of it is embedded in our website. So I would encourage you to go to either bizhelp.miami or to beaconcouncil.com in order to get the details about how to apply to that program. And then our team will reach out to you. If you're missing some information, we'll reach out to you and say, hey, we need some additional information in order for you to ensure that you'll be able to receive funding. Now, the good news, Bruce, you mentioned that this program closes out tomorrow, June 30th. Through a lot of really good work on behalf of CareerSource, they've now lifted that date, so there's no longer a sunset on June 30th. Basically, we'll accept applications until the money runs out. But I would encourage companies to get their applications in as soon as possible because it is first come, first served. So if you wait, it's likely that the program will run out of money before you get served. But the due date that was originally set for tomorrow has been extended. So I'd encourage you to make sure you get your application in sooner rather than later. Beyond that, we are working with about 15 other organizations that's really focused on helping businesses in general. So there's funding that's needed. There's helping to get reconnected to talent. There's a need to get access to new customers. And we are working on all 3 of those fronts to really try and ensure that businesses have the highest probability of getting back up and running. We're also putting together a fairly comprehensive list of the kinds of services that are available from all these different partnering organizations, whether it's funding, technical assistance, access to business customers, whatever the case may be. We're working very aggressively with all these partners to ensure that our companies have the highest probability of getting back up and running after post-COVID-19.
Awesome. That's great news, Michael. I'm glad to hear it's extended and that it can run its course in the appropriate way. Real quick follow-up question, though. How does that play into things like the PPP? Is this complementary alongside it, or what? How does that work for anyone who's listening?
Yes. So for companies that have between 3 and 50 employees, it doesn't matter if you receive funding from any of the other programs. As long as you can make a case that you need this resource and you have receipts, and it's a reimbursement of expenditures that you've already had. And so if you have receipts that document that you had to go out and buy new technology, or that you had to invest in PPE or something else that's an unusual business expense, those are the kinds of things that this money is intended to assist with. And so it doesn't matter if you got access to some of those other programs. This really is intended to be in addition to.
Awesome. Thank you for that. You mentioned, and I love your story about the power of giving, and it's almost like you're softballing this to me, but Give Miami Day, I think, is one of those great moments in our city where it's about everyone getting involved. And it seems to me more about the volume of people and that act of giving and signaling that you want to support these organizations. And then they get follow up and then contributions from other donors. And I think that's all just incredible. So Rebecca, can you tell us a little bit about, one, stepping into the role at the Miami Foundation during all these crazy times right now, and you put out a really powerful letter on your first day, which says a lot of, and a lot to your confidence and ability of leading that organization. And I would love to follow up with, kind of piggybacking off of Michael's answer. You have 2 funds in play right now, the Community Recovery Fund and the Racial Equity Fund. Can you talk a little bit more about those and how people should get involved?
Absolutely. First of all, you put together a hell of a group here. I feel like I could listen all day to my peers on this panel, and so much respect to all of you for what you're doing. I picked a crazy first day of work. So June 1st, 2020. And I think this is one of those dates where we will look back decades from now and remember where we were as we were navigating the coronavirus leadership moment. But June 1st is the first day of hurricane season in the middle of a pandemic. And while our nation is grieving and grappling with its long legacy of racism. Gayle, listening to your story before, every Black man in my life has a list of stories to bear. And every Black mother in my life has had the conversation dozens of times with their children and carries with them a burden of trauma that they carry as a result, not just of the specific examples of racism that they've experienced, but of system level racism that we as a country have tolerated. And so I think like what this moment calls upon us to do is to not just put Band-Aids on what is happening, but to ask where the system level change lies and how we can stand behind that change, and to not be satisfied with little solutions, thousands of paper cut solutions, but for us to ask ourselves, like, do we see the source of what is broken? Are we willing to have the uncomfortable conversations for long enough and to identify all of the systems that are tolerating or that are allowing us as a country to be racist in what we do? And we see this, you're right, Bruce, when you framed us up at the beginning of this conversation, that coronavirus has shined a light on system level racism. When you look to see who has access to testing, who has access to quality healthcare in this moment, who has access to the food that they need, to the care that they need, to the loans that they need, there is racism at every level. We think about it on the education front, which students are able to log in, which are not, who is getting access at every single level. And we need to see what is broken, and then to notice how quickly we are able to spring into change. Like, we can no longer pretend that every single business in our community didn't figure out how they were going to handle this moment where everything was turned on its head, and we just had to figure out how to, whether it's do things from home or digitize our materials. Like, we were able on a dime, faster than we ever could have imagined, to figure out how to change in this moment, and to not tolerate baby solutions and to pats on the back. Oh, we are sad about this, and this is the sexy topic topic of the moment, and then 2 months from now, when something else comes up, we're done with this topic. We have to allow ourselves to sit in this and to go for system level solutions. And so, to your question about the funds that are happening right now at the Miami Foundation, our aim is to look across the community and say, what are the issues that matter most to the future of our region? And who are the people that are solving those issues? How do we bring them together and get them to solve bigger with each other? And how do we bring together businesses and philanthropists and the power of our elected leaders to make system level change? And so we have many funds going on at the same time, at any given time, for many different issue areas that matter in Miami. But the two right now that are top of mind for me are our Racial Equity Fund, which is raising funds for those who are at the front lines of addressing racism in all its forms in our community. And then the other is our Community Relief Fund related to coronavirus. And soon enough, 2 months from now, I imagine we're going to be in the thick of hurricane season as well. And there's going to be emergency needs there too. And so we're all working on multiple layers trying to find solutions. And my ask for the community is, for whatever you care about in Miami, you should be identifying the issues that matter most to you and finding ways to give of yourself to support the organizations, to help them build connections, build the resources that they need, and build bold solutions. This is a moment that allows us to be bold. And so I've been moved to see how generous Miami is in this moment and how willing we are to be big in our thinking and in our solutions. And so I hope that people will reach out to the foundation well before Give Miami Day, where our community comes out in the tens of thousands to give to organizations of choice. They need resources now. And I would say in particular for all the organizations who have been doing work for decades focused on racial equity, this is not a new topic. It has a heat on it in this moment. They have momentum. And so if this is something that you care about, this is a moment to give and to give boldly and to let organizations know that you're with them and that you support them. So that they can seize the moment.
Awesome, thank you, Rebecca. You talk about a thing that I think we all experience in our work, and that is essentially like burnout of the topic. Essentially, the next topic takes the elevation, it gets the news cycle. People, I think, get frustrated by their inability as an individual to act change. And, those dinner conversations get frustrating and you're just like, I wish we could do something. To the panel, or to Rebecca, since you're unmuted here, how do we fight that? How do we keep making sure we're having this conversation so we can get it done? I think we're all kind of sick of and here we go again, and we didn't do anything last time. So what can we do here?
Yeah, so I think the court of public opinion is really strong in this generation, and the topics that we make important ourselves as a mass of people, that's how they stay hot. I think it used to be that what news reported on then became the topic people paid attention to, and we now are seeing a flip that what the community cares about becomes the news, which is incredibly powerful. And so I think to myself, there are hundreds of people who are tuned in right now. It'll probably be thousands by the end of the day to this conversation. It's 5 o'clock in the afternoon that we can luxuriate in this conversation right now, and just to think about the contrast that 60% of Miami doesn't have $400 in savings and is trying to figure out how to navigate this moment where unemployment is running out, where the PPP loans are running out, that we have hundreds, and then it will be thousands of us that can sit and enjoy this dialogue. We have immense privilege with which to use our time and our resource to make sure that the things that matter most to the future of our region are top of mind, and that we cannot allow for the voice of those issues to be drawn by somebody else. We need to decide, this is an issue that we care about. This is a Me Too moment for racism, and we are not going to let go of this topic until we have solutions at hand, and that we continue talking about it long after there's other things that are sexy and exciting. And I think the public needs to know their power and use and wield their power.
Hey, Bruce, it's Mike. I thought I'd just take the opportunity to put a couple of ideas out there with all the listeners. My first idea is, let's do something really audacious to help Florida Memorial University. Right? We have one of the HBCUs right here in our backyard. HBCUs around the country have selectively been picked by very wealthy individuals and corporate entities to fund major scholarships for students and to pay off student loans and other things. Why don't we as a community try and figure out how to pull something off like that for Florida Memorial? It won't take anything away from any other university. I mean, we work with all of them, so don't misunderstand my comment. But here's a moment where Black universities, historically Black colleges and universities across the United States, are getting these incredible gifts from philanthropy all across the United States. Why don't we get on a campaign to do some outreach into these major markets and resources from people who clearly are making these commitments and say, take a look at Florida Memorial University and let's do something here. And maybe we start with some of our capacity to give right here in this community. That's one big idea. And I think Japheth Hardrick, who is the president at Florida Memorial, I'm probably surprising him by saying this, but it's the right thing to do. And it's going to help the students who attend that university. It's going to help strengthen that university. The second idea, I have heard from hundreds of individuals, Black-owned businesses in particular. We have an urban initiatives task force that's focused on helping the Black business community as a part of the Beacon Council. And that task force has been pretty active over the time that I've been here in Miami. But I can tell you, they have elevated the conversation and the temperature in the room around how we do more and how we do more.
Oh, Michael, I hate to interrupt you. I think we lost you for a second there.
For loans and other things. And then secondly, help us get business. The reality is those two things are like yin and yang, right? There's lots of business opportunities out there within the public sector, the private sector. But if there's not companies that have the capacity to take that business on, they won't grow, right? And most of the time they don't have the capacity because they don't have the working capital. They can't afford the work, they can't get the loans and so on. And so we can easily create that. We can literally decide that some of our successful businesses are going to take them under their wings and they're going to help them get access to the lending capacity they need. They're going to help them get access to the customers that they need in order to actually grow. And let's try and grow a few of these companies to be 9-figure institutions here in this community, as opposed to managing to just get by. I think these are things that are all doable, but it requires us to start thinking differently and acting differently and understanding that this pie is getting bigger, not getting smaller when we help others.
Quick follow-up, Michael, is that Florida Memorial University, is that a fund that exists? Do you think there's a vehicle to donate through to that? Or are you suggesting like, let's build that?
Well, Florida Memorial, they have a development organization within the college. My wife and I, we've attended some of their fundraising events in the past, but they're relatively small. But here's an opportunity where I think if anybody wants to contact Japheth Hardrick, the president of Florida Memorial University, he would certainly welcome having that conversation. And I know that they're starting to have these conversations because I was just on the phone with Japheth last week. And so I know they're starting to have these conversations. And I didn't tell him that I might have an opportunity to put something out there real public like this. But the reality is it's an opportunity for all of us.
We are fast approaching time, and that is scary because this is a great conversation. So I will ask if the panelists, if you're able to stay, I think people are going to keep chatting a little bit longer. Obviously, I don't want to like go all night until we're brain dead here, but I don't want to necessarily have to have a hard cut right here. If you have to go, I understand, and I'll link people up with your exact information on ways to get active and to support your work. Gayle, I saw you unmuting a few times. I don't know if you had something you wanted to jump in as well.
Oh my goodness. I mean, Rebecca got me like so hyped up. I just got to stay in my seat to stay on camera. But again, to Raul's service, think about what we all just said. Raul's service and his wife as a big brother. Michael's service as a big brother, just giving back. And we're not the only show in town. I get that. But as CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters, I just have to just thank everybody. What Tony talked about in terms of just being real and recognizing his white privilege. I mean, so think about this, folks. Rebecca talking about the trauma that she's not only heard from her Black friends and mothers and all the Black men that she's talked to in her career. Thank you. Because these are the conversations. This is not, I mean, if it were not for this, folks, we would not be having a lot of these conversations. Nobody videotaped me. I could have been dead in a parking lot as a college student, visiting his dad, seeking to reconcile with my father. Think about that. Just a kid taking a trip to see his dad. And so insert anyone's name. But I want to just focus on some of the solution-oriented things and Michael touched on it. I talked to Japheth Hardrick today. My next board meeting, I'll be on the campus of Florida Memorial University. And I'll be Zooming in all of my board members, many of whom have never stepped foot on the campus of Florida Memorial University. And I'll be in that executive boardroom and Zooming in my board members. And I'll just tease everybody. But Japhus and I will be signing a document, co-signing a document that formalizes a partnership with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Miami that will it's going to be next level. We need people to invest in that particular partnership. We're calling it the Lion Pride Partnership. So let me just be clear. We can talk all we want about mentoring is nice. Ask the gang leader from Liberty City that now just left one job at Tesla and is now working somewhere else. Booker T. Washington graduate. So these are the results. Mentoring is not nice, it's necessary. Let me say that again. It's not nice, it's necessary. And yesterday I spent 3.5 hours on believe it or not, on a Zoom call. So I'm zoomed out for the next couple of days, just in case I get an invite. And with an organization in Little Haiti, and talking to them about partnership. So collaboration is a new competition. And so we think about what can we do? And as I go in my round 2 of 2, based on my time frame tonight, Bruce, I want to just let everybody know, silence is not an option. It's not an option. And for everyone out there, whether you've experienced it or not, even talk about your white fragility, talk about your white privilege, talk about it. Because when someone else opens it, when people look at me or look at Michael and make assumptions, I put on a baseball cap backwards and walk with some jeans on and a t-shirt, people look at me a little differently. Then they say, oh, you're the CEO. I've been at my own events. And I had people walk up to me and say, can you get me another drink? I said, no, I'm going on stage in just a minute. I'm the CEO. And I kind of said I didn't say it with an attitude, but wow, the assumption, the subtle bigotry of diminished expectations. Say that out loud. The subtle bigotry of diminished expectations. When you see me, why don't you see a CEO as opposed to a waiter? And I'm not in any way diminishing those who are in the service industry. And let me be clear. But a couple things in terms of action steps that I want people to understand. Invest. Invest in Black business. Invest in organizations. And I know I got a phone call. I had a corporate call today. I've had about 3 of these in the last 3 weeks. People I've never talked to, that I've reached out to for support, are now calling me saying, we need to invest in, I said, go ahead and say it. And they pause. Say Black, just go ahead and say it out loud. We want to invest in businesses. Oh, you always invest in business, but you want to intentionally, because of your corporate bottom line and the image. And God knows, I have zero issues with someone investing in our brand, but not because it's fashion. Don't do it because it's fashionable. Do it because it's the right thing to do. And so to all the donors out there, invest. And keep in mind, but vet the businesses. Don't just throw money out there. Vet the companies. I have a responsibility as CEO to make sure I can tell you, here's the measurable impact that we will give you as a branded Big Brothers, Big Sisters. And the last thing I want to say, from slavery to mass incarceration to police brutality, let's not let corporations off the hook as well, because it might not have been on TV, but the hiring practices. And Rebecca, my sister Rebecca, mentioned this wholeheartedly. Not just having the right people, a diverse group of people at the table to make the decisions. And you keep the vicious cycle of just the same old going. So it's time to not only rock the boat, it's time to let everybody in the boat. Let's sail together for a more perfect humanity. And we can do a whole lot of good. It helps us on the bottom line. It's not just to feel good. It helps us on the bottom line, Bruce.
Thank you.
Bruce, I'll say that's something that everybody who's tuning in can do right now. If you're looking for a way to help with system level change, it's to what Gayle shared right now. Wherever you work, you should question the hiring practices, the way that people recruit, the way that people are, whether there are transparent salary bands, how people get promotions, who is in the leadership, who serves on the board, and be pushing to make it clear to your business that people are watching, that people care, and that we set a bar for the expectations of both where we work as well as where we spend our dollars. And that when enough people demand that of their businesses and of where they spend their dollars, things shift. And some people, they may first be doing it, Gayle, as you mentioned, like sometimes it will come at first because people want to just be affiliating with what seems like, I think I will get a positive good if I show that I care about that right now. But there comes a moment at which the tide shifts. And we're like, frankly, if you do not do that, you have missed the boat and you are stale in your practices. And we are coming to a tipping point moment where I think if enough people demonstrate this is just a baseline for what we expect from our businesses, we will see a major shift.
So Rebecca's calling out something I think really, really important, which is say like individual action in mass gets us to a tipping point, right? In other words, it shifts and changes culture. And I think there's a question that came through here that said, do we believe or do I believe that the Cuban American community, in nicer terms, has understood that its narrative of fleeing oppression was used to kind of gain kind of maybe political power, but now it also can be oppressing. I think there could be truth to both sides here, right? The Cuban American community was fleeing oppression. It was fleeing kind of a totalitarian state, and it equally might have faced prejudice in this country, whether in Miami in the early kind of 60s or other parts of the country. God knows I've been to parts of the States where people look at me funny because of my first name, and it's kind of par for the course of being called Raul. But in Miami, I'm just Raulito, right? I'm just another Raul of the dozens that we have, right? Or hundreds that we have. And so you can be in this dual existence where there are places like Miami where the Cuban American community absolutely is a cultural majority, right? And in some cases, we can define it also as an economic power and economic majority. And it, in its practices, right, can also perpetuate injustice. It can perpetuate prejudice. And so to bring it back to Rebecca's point, I think it's on each of us, right, to bring our respective communities along for the journey, right? At the dinner table, when somebody, almost always an older member of the family, makes a comment, right, or critiques in a certain way, I think that natural inclination is to kind of get stared down, usually by your grandmother or an aunt or a mother, and says, don't make a deal out of this. The natural inclination is like, don't cause a ruckus at Sunday dinner. And maybe it's not at the dinner table, maybe it's afterwards on the side. But the idea that collectively, I, my siblings, my cousins, all of us need to make an effort to say, hey, saying certain things, right, betrays that you think of these people, whatever it might be, right? It might be the LGBTQ community, it might be the Black community, whatever bucket we might be kind of making fun of in that moment, we think of them as less than us, right? Yet to the commenter, to the person who posed the question, that's exactly what brought us to this country, right? That's exactly why we're here, because we didn't want to be seen as inferior. We didn't want to be seen as different. We want to have the full potential of the world and of life at our disposal. And so I think being able to, in our everyday, call out those micro injustices, those little moments where we're not our best version of ourselves, and we know that our communities aren't the best version of ourselves, our family members who we love dearly and we owe a tremendous amount of honor and respect to, how we call those folks out, how we call those moments out really respectfully, I think also collectively moves us forward, right? And so, yeah, I just want to recognize, I think importantly, that yes, in Miami, despite the fact that America gives us a ton of participation trophies and first place awards for being diverse and this and that, and I think we've taken a ton of comfort in that praise, right? We've kind of let ourselves rest on these fake laurels. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of work to be done in going past the grout lines of the mosaic that is Miami, right? This isn't a melting pot. There's a very clear grout lines between communities. We got to start breaking that down. And that starts at home. It starts in our daily actions, where we shop, where we kind of visit, all that kind of stuff, but also how we speak and how we relate to family members.
Thank you for that. Now, with a little bit of time, we're going over here, but I want to address a few of the questions from the Q&A and the chat here. This one I think is interesting, and I'd be curious to hear the group's feedback on. So the question is, I've had many approach me about making Black lives whole through reparations. What are your thoughts on the local financial reparations fund? Could this be something that the Racial Equity Fund leverages?
So, yes. Oh, sorry, someone has.
No, please go ahead, Rebecca. Go ahead.
I think we as a country have not figured out how to truly pay restitution for our original sin as a country. And we are going to continue to come back to this question until we figure out a way to, I don't know that we will ever make right what we did wrong. I don't know that you ever could make right what we did wrong. But I think we have never very seriously as a country looked at the reparation option and asked ourselves, like, what do we owe for the wrong that we did? I don't know at a micro level that I can solve that at the scale of the funds that I have for our Racial Equity Fund here. But I think like it is really important for our leadership locally and our leadership at a state level and our leadership at a national level to be having like very serious conversation about this.
Yeah, Michael, did you want to follow up with that?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's, to me, there's a lot of different ways of addressing the sins of the past. And so, Black people built this country. What's really ironic, and sometimes I'm still just absolutely startled when I think about my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather was a slave. And we think it's something that's, literally so far in the past that it's not that close, right? And I'm sure some of you, and I'm positive some of the listeners, actually know their great-grandparents. So that's how close slavery is to us. I probably am the oldest member of this panel, and so I have a little bit of an advantage in that regard, but my great-grandfather was a slave. His parents and my grandparents literally helped build this country. And so the question of reparations is not something that I understand how to address, but I can say, if you have the capacity to invest dollars to help Black businesses, invest it that way. That certainly would help. If you have the capacity to help students get to college or university, so they don't end up burdened with the kind of debt that they come out burdened with, invest in our historically Black colleges and universities. I mean, there's so many ways that every single person who have the capacity can do good. And certainly our government at the national level should in fact attempt to do more that really enables this leveling of the playing field through education and business opportunity. Those have been the great equalizers indefinitely, right? Rebuild Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? Rebuild Black Wall Street. Rebuild Detroit. Detroit was a second location for what was one of the most significant economic powers in the Black community. And those things got destroyed for a lot of unbelievable reasons. Rebuild those and you'll have the same impact that you will by giving reparations.
Thank you. There are some really incredible questions here. One that I want to kind of turn a little bit. The question originally was, do you believe we can reform the police or do we need to defund and start over? We could have hour-long conversation about all of that, and I want to be careful about our time and making sure people have a time to explain and answer in that type of question. So kind of skipping a few steps, from each of the panelists, assuming that you could allocate a larger portion of the pie, to use Michael's terminology, for funding, what would you fund to help our community at large? I know it's kind of a wild card here.
Well, let me just jump in. I just want to be very quick on this one. Messaging matters. Messaging matters. And when I think of, the term defund, redistribute, reallocate, invest. And there's a common theme here, investing. Little sister Jordan, who's at Florida State in her second year, got a scholarship. And her big sister is Chief Delma Noel Pratt, first female police chief in the city of Miami Gardens. And little sister Jordan said, I want to be a police officer. She wants to go to the FBI. She wants to go into law enforcement. And she said her friends were ridiculing her, saying, why would you ever go into a profession like that? It's been that little girl's dream for years. And so when she was ridiculed by some of her friends, who did she call her big sister? And the chief said, don't you ever, ever leave your passion. And she said, now I'm more committed than ever to making a change. When I get there, things will be different. And so messaging matters. So I don't want funds taken away from law enforcement so that this little sister cannot live out her dream. Little brother Markel, who a police officer actually talked to, he lost his brother due to gun violence. He said, you know what, you would make a great police officer. Markel, since 2015, is a city of Miami police officer, keeping us safe. I don't want Markel defunded. I don't want little sister Jordan defunded. I want racists out of the police department. That's what I want. I want, when I make that phone call and the flag that sits in my office, this is personal for me. And so when Michael talked about his great-grandfather being a slave, I got a flag that sits in my office. My uncle, my first mentor, dad parents were divorced when I was 2, mind you. Late Deputy Sheriff Gary Claypool, out in Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. And when he died and I spoke at his funeral, and I saw law enforcement, men, women, everywhere, it's like every nation represented. And when I stood before his casket at that cemetery, and they did a flyover and they just kind of dipped and showed a respect. All I'm saying, folks, is, police brutality, there's no place for it. There's no place for a racist in a police uniform, but also in a business suit. Let's be clear. This conversation has to be bigger than police departments. So let's make investments in community-based organizations. Let's partner with police departments. I'm not highlighting Biggs and Blue as the be-all, end-all, but I got 200 officers that are matched to children. And you know what those kids are saying? That's my friend. And so the first people to say that we don't need racist cops are the good police officers. And we have good police officers, and we need to support them. And that in no way says we tolerate. And as a Black man, let me say it as loudly as I can. In no way should we ever tolerate police brutality and militarize our police to the point where you can be the biggest and baddest. You need to be most caring and the most compassionate and get involved in community-based organizations and supporting mental health. Those are the allocations and investments we need to make. And so when I hear defund, it makes me uncomfortable because I want to be able to call the police when I need help. But don't look at me as the victim. Do your job.
Building on what Gayle said, I would say just to police officers, look in the mirror as you go about dealing with us in the streets, right? Because every time there's been one of these instances, the refrain that you hear over and over again is that this is one of those rare exceptions. Not all police officers are bad police officers. This is a rare thing. Let's give it a chance. Let's not assume that they're guilty of something wrong. Let's find out what the facts are, right? I mean, that's always the refrain that you hear. And actually, that's the right refrain, in my humble opinion. You should not jump to those conclusions. You should not assume that the cop or police officer had not been trained to do what they did, and so on and so forth. Because those that are truly out for no good, they're that rare 1 or 0.5% or whatever that percentage is. It is not by any stroke of the imagination the vast majority. The vast majority are really good people, and that's been my experience. I've had bad experiences, not nearly as bad as Gayle's, but I've had bad experiences. But the vast majority of the time, it's been overwhelmingly positive. But what I would say is, look in the mirror and treat us exactly the same way that you're asking to be treated. You're asking us to give you the benefit of the doubt. You're asking us to believe that this really minute percentage are the bad guys. The same is true of us. And oh, by the way, the same is true of virtually every ethnic group there is. There are those few that are the bad, and then there's others that are not so bad. And you have to give us the same benefit of the doubt.
Amen.
I will add to that, the spotlight right now is on the violence that's happening towards Black people at the hands of police, but there is violence happening to Black people in all of our systems. And some of that is violence of the body, and some of that is violence of the spirit. And so I think in the same way as you say, Michael, that we need to get people who are racist, they cannot be in a position of power in a police uniform. People who are racist, they cannot be in a position of power as an educator over a child. People who are racist cannot be the doctor who's making medical choices for a body in a hospital. We need to be holding that bar and asking ourselves two questions. One is, how do we make sure there are no racists? What are we doing to screen for racism in all of our systems and the violence that they perpetrate with their power? But also, how do we spend our dollars? And are we spending our dollars in a way that is criminalizing Black people? Or do we spend our dollars in a way that is strengthening Black communities? So I think that is at the heart of the question, is when we divide up our budget, how much of our budget are we using to create opportunity, to create wealth, to create strength? And so when you ask, how would you spend dollars differently? There are so many organizations that are doing the work of strengthening communities and who often would be the place to go to address some of the issues that we've been calling upon police to do for us, that actually is not the thing that they were designed to do for our communities. And so we need to be thinking about all of the things, all of the pressures that we are putting upon our police force to do, and ask ourselves, what are the things that only police can do? And what are the things that we're burdening them to do that actually, if we spent those dollars towards an organization that was best designed to solve that problem, we might actually create more strength in our community.
I think partly because Gayle kind of inspired this, but if I had kind of this magic wand, I think if we can't do a national kind of year of service, maybe a local year of service, right? AmeriCorps style. I think there's something so transformative in humbling yourself to put yourself in somebody else's reality, right? It's so easy from the comfort of our couch or Twitter or the screen or social to generalize and to denigrate. Real hard work can't be substituted for likes and retweets, right? That's not how we're going to change this. It's about immersing ourselves, humbling ourselves, and putting ourselves at the service of others. And so I'm a huge kind of believer, and I think America would be a much different and a much better place if we all took a year after high school, or at some point in those college years, and gave a year of service to the country, to a community that does not look like ours, that makes us uncomfortable in some ways, right? And that challenges us with our biases and our preconceived notions. If we could do that, even in Miami, right? Even in Miami, if we could do that, I think this city would be a radically better place.
All amazing ideas, Raul. I think that's really great. I mean, my traveling abroad in college really transformed and opened my perspective. Even, someone growing up on an interfaith commune where I thought that I had seen a lot of different cultures and been exposed to a lot. I think it's really important. I think that's one of the issues with our country in general, is that we live in a very sheltered society and we don't have access to international perspectives. And I think that we're finding that that's impacting us now. And look, we're the laughing stock of the world at the moment, with 25% of all COVID cases and the way that it's been handled. And now we're not allowed to travel out of this country. So it's really interesting how, the tables have turned on us, and we're, basically, being looked at as a racist, irresponsible society. And Miami, unfortunately, is bearing the brunt of that at the moment with the resurgence of cases, which partly is probably due to the acceleration of testing, but partly, due to our kind of lax practices. And so I think, there's a lot that we really need to do, and it goes back to giving back to their communities and service, as you spoke about, Raul and Gayle. It's really important to get engaged with the communities. And I think that, 2 weeks ago, actually it was about a week and a half ago, a server in a pizzeria in my hometown where I grew up in Sebastian went in and with an AK-47 and shot up his manager because he had emotional issues. And you don't even see this on the news, and this is happening all the time. So we talk about the police violence, and then you talk about, our access to automatic weapons, and why is this happening? And so it's a vicious cycle that we really need to do a lot of deep, work individually on kind of what is ailing us, and why is this happening? And I agree, it's about reinvesting and reallocating capital. We look at people say defund the military, defund the police. And I agree, it needs to be analyzed, it needs to be looked at, and we need to invest in places where you're getting a return on community and not just a return on investment, but where you're actually making a difference and you have a metric that can show, well, we're improving our communities. And there's many different metrics to do that, not just financial returns. And I think we're getting to that point where if we don't take into consideration people, planet, profit, and purpose, we just should not be doing anything at this point. I think we've kind of gotten past the point where we're a fully extractive society, and we need to start working on regenerative practices at all levels. And that's really something that I think everyone in this panel, I feel like we're preaching to the converted. So we're all talking to ourselves, and I think everybody who's watching. But I think you have to have those uncomfortable and hard conversations that Raul was talking at the dinner table with your grandmother, with your aunt, with your parents, and the younger generation, needs to also lead as well, needs to step up and not be so apathetic and go to the polls and vote, and not be so disconnected from the process. I think we're in this situation of instant gratification where you can press Uber Eats and you can get food right to your doorstep in 20 minutes or 30 minutes. I think that's a problem, because people don't realize, how was that food prepared? Where did it come from? Who was the farmer that created it? What exactly are the steps, and how many people were harmed in the process? What types of pesticides were used? And I think that's really, we have to go back to basics. And I think that's really kind of what is the result that we're seeing on all these different fronts. And I unfortunately think it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, until people really have a big mass awakening. And I think there is, on the one hand, this big conscious awakening happening. On the other hand, we're shining a spotlight on all of this racism and bigotry and hate and hatred that's there. But I want to see it. I don't want it to be hiding in the shadows. I think we need to embrace it. We need to understand why it exists, and we need to work towards more unity and collaboration, understanding where these issues come from. And I think a lot of it does come from policy. A lot of it does come from this cross-sector collaboration that we're all talking about here. And you guys all come from, the foundational background, the public-private partnership background, but I'm the only one from the private sector, and the private sector also needs to lead. The private sector needs to say, this is my responsibility. I'm responsible for employing thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of people. And it's time that we come together with the public sector and we align our values and our principles as a society, because what's best for, society, should be best for that company, best for the government, best for every organization. And I think so many people are working in silos that, we need to come together and really collaborate. And that's where we're going to see the change that we want to see in the world.
Awesome. Thank you all for that. That was a curveball answer, and I think you all hit it perfectly. We are well over time here, and I owe you all favors, I'm sure now. So put me on your panels too, if you'd like, and you can run over time. So to wrap us up, Gayle has to run to a meeting, so I'm going to kick this to him first. Gayle, I want to make sure that people really leave here knowing how they can get involved. What should they do? And then one last curveball here. Since we all have this moment, we can be together and then have this conversation like you've flagged, Rebecca. We're certainly privileged to have that place. What is one organization not here that you think people should know about? So Gayle, I put you on the spot, but
no, that's great. The NAACP, the oldest civil rights organization. I mean, they've been on the battlefield for centuries. Think about it. I mean, they've been fighting this fight. I mean, from water hoses to dogs, and long before there was social media. And that was one of the first organizations I reached out to. I mean, there's a lot of smaller organizations doing great things with the best of intentions. But I think oftentimes people forget. I mean, people even tell me, oh, you're big brothers, big sisters. You don't need any money. Really? I need to pay my staff. I need to take care of these kids year round. There's never a day off, if you will, because these kids need us. They call us. We'll be there for them. So to your question, Bruce, and I just want to say thank you again to these incredible panelists. I'm privileged to be in the midst of such just sincerity and compassion. But I would definitely do a shout out to the NAACP. Don't call it a comeback. They've been here for years. And having said that, it's getting involved with civic engagement, dealing with systemic racism, and just making sure that we all can make a difference. And my closing thought is the cost of doing nothing is just far too high. 1906. Thank you, Courtney, for dropping the history in the chat. Real time. I'm using the props, everything I have, Bruce, to I didn't know the year, but when you think about that, they've been on the battlefield. So thank you for having me. I got to zoom out to jump on another Zoom. Let's do this again next week. This won't be fixed by 4 o'clock. Well, it's 6 o'clock anyway, so obviously it wasn't fixed. But,
I'll send around the meeting hold. Yeah.
There you go. Thank you,
Thanks,
guys.
Gayle.
Bye.
Okay. How about Tony? For some reason, the yellow box is around you. I got to go to you. Last remarks and send a shout out to one organization you think is doing incredible work that we should know.
I had the privilege of working with branches, with Miami Foundation and the United Way and this Little Haiti Small Business Relief Fund, and to bring it local. They're doing great work and, a lot of financial literacy and education. And so I really had a great experience with them. So, and they need resources and they need funding, and there's so many organizations, but, I just had a personal great experience with them in the Little Haiti Small Business Relief Fund. So wanted to give them a shout out, and it's been a privilege working with them and the work that they're doing in the community, and they've been great to work with. And there's so many great organizations here locally, but it's been a privilege to be on this panel. I'm inspired by each and every one of you. And, it really kind of motivates me to really, do more and serve more. And Miami is really an incredible platform and an incredible community, and it's very diverse. And, we need to break down as many barriers as possible. And I truly believe in its potential. So I'm excited with leaders like yourself and colleagues like this to really do the work that needs to be done to really build a solid new foundation for the future of Miami. So thank you. Thank you. It's been a privilege being here.
Thank you. All right. Now I'm just going down the list that I see in order from the chat. Michael.
I'm gonna go in a place that no one would probably expect. And I'm going to say it's the small business team at Miami-Dade County. And so some of you may know Gary Hartfield, Lawanda Wright Robinson. I've gotten to know them very well over the past several months. Again, we didn't play real deep in the small business space until this whole COVID-19 thing happened. But they are some of the most resourceful people that I've gotten to know in the last few months. They help companies immensely. Of course, they help them get business with Miami-Dade County, but they help them become certified as either a minority supplier, women-owned business supplier. They help them with financing. They help with technical assistance. And they're managing, in round numbers, about 2,000 small businesses in our community. And of course, we are now engaged with them in a partnership to try and be more helpful. So I just thought I'd put that out there, because if you're a small business looking for help and you want to do business with Miami-Dade County, they've got the real deal there. And I don't think that's widely known.
Thank you, Michael. Next, I see Rebecca, and then Raul, you'll take us home.
All right. So closing thoughts. I mean, I know who tunes in and reads The New Tropic. These are people who really care about the future of their city and who want to, what is it that you say, live like you live here? That like people who, yes, I get my t-shirt. That people who tune in and who are viewers and who read The New Tropic, they have their ear to the ground on the issues that matter to them and on what it takes to build the kind of city that they want to live in and build in and play in. And I would urge everybody who's tuning in to just wield their power in this moment. And I'd invite you to join me with something that an organization in Miami is doing that I think is really noteworthy this month. They say it takes 21 days to build a new habit. And the YWCA launched today a 21-day anti-racism challenge where you tune in, you can sign up if you go to the YWCA's website. And if you're not familiar with the YWCA, you may have heard of them, but they are an organization whose mission is to eradicate racism and to empower women. And if you go on their website, you can sign up to join the challenge. If you don't have a team that you can join, feel free to join the Miami Foundation's team. And every day for the next 21 days, you will get an email that gives you a challenge for something that you can do to reflect and to strengthen your own racial justice practice. And it really is a practice for all of us to be in a constant state of growth and work. And so I encourage you to join and to support the work that they do, which I think is really noteworthy. So thank you for having us.
Thanks, Rebecca. Raul, take us home.
So biased, clearly, but I would encourage folks to either learn about the work of Big Brothers Big Sisters in Miami, get involved, contribute, donate. That team does the hard work day in, day out. It's not glamorous, but it changes lives and it changes trajectories, right? And the closing thought I have is that I'm actually very, very kind of optimistic about this whole situation. And I'm optimistic specifically at this moment in time when there's a public health crisis in many different forms, because this city has so many people in it who understand what it means to go through really challenging times. And when you peel back the onion at a bus stop, at a cafecito window, wherever it is that you're at and you're gonna meet somebody new, one of the first things they kind of tell you is kind of their story, how they got here, what they're up to, what they're looking for, why they do it, where their family is, the hustle and the struggle. And so I think that in our DNA, right, imprinted on us as Miamians, is actually a really deep level and sense of empathy that needs really creative outlets like the ones that Rebecca and others have mentioned, like Big Brother Big Sister, to activate it, right? I don't think that we're genetically deficient. I don't think that we lack empathy and that we're some sort of subpar kind of mutation from the rest of the country. I think we're actually much more empathetic and much more giving and much more caring. We just need really creative ways to kind of unleash that and unlock that and bridge that between communities. So I think we have the raw materials, absolutely. And I think if we take those steps each and every day, very small steps in how we live our life, to Rebecca's point, forming new habits takes some time, but if you do it day in, day out, I think the city has a really real and actually grand chance of promoting kind of greater cohesion, greater equality, greater accessibility amongst all. And ultimately, really what it boils down to is greater prosperity for everyone who's here.
Awesome. Thank you, Raul. Thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you for our attendees and viewers of the live stream. I think we just barely, if at all, scratched the surface on this. And I'm so grateful for you all to give us such incredible insights into your work. And, you know, I know we didn't get to have a ton of back and forth here, and I hope we can continue these type of conversations and really start to break it down based on different topics. I will say to anyone watching that, you know, part of how we view the world is that stream on our feeds, Instagram, Facebook, whatever you're looking at, your inbox. Subscribe to these organizations here, get their newsletters. That's where you're going to get the unfiltered story of what they're doing. At the New Tropic, we can't necessarily tell every story every day, and so it's usually a snippet. If you want to know deep dive into their work, follow them. Follow them on Instagram, follow them on Twitter, and that'll start to understand what you can do and daily, and not just kind of wait for answers. So again, thank you all, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you so much. Take care.